Today's guest is Howie Ferguson. He's the executive director at the Construction Owners Association of America. So, Howie, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tots.
Yeah, so Howie, I was looking at your background, and you came out with a civil engineering degree in construction. I mean, was that always the plan?
That's an interesting, simple question with a complex. No, I don't know that there was a plan. It was more like that's just kind of what felt right when I was an undergraduate, and I really didn't have a plan. I did know this though. I co-opted the thing where you kind of work a semester, then go back to school for a semester with a civil engineering firm in my hometown, and loved it. But also realized I didn't want to practice civil engineering. I just didn't want to. I don't want to design parking lots and wastewater treatment plants and whatever else. I mean, civils do cool stuff. It was a it was a great broad foundation in terms of problem solving, understanding the industry. But I ended up getting into a lot more vertical construction than horizontal anyway. So there really wasn't a plan.
Yeah, yeah, and from your schooling, you went into the U.S. Navy, the Civil Engineering Corps. How did that happen?
Yeah, great question. And kind of a cool story. It was one of my professors at the University of Florida was a retired naval officer in this thing that I'd never heard of called the Civil Engineer Corps. And I don't know that I was a favorite or anything, and I don't know that I said anything, but something sparked him to grab me after class and say, "Hey, let me tell you a little bit about my background, and this might be something you're interested in." And I listened and followed up on it, and became really interested when I found out that I would deploy with something that you may have heard of. They're very kind of famous, called the CBs. These are deployable construction battalions, CBs. So they call them CBs, and there's that, but there's also more family conducive jobs, tours where I would be in charge of construction projects or in charge of maintaining and operating facilities, very much like a public works kind of job.
Yeah.
All of that was within the Civil Engineer Corps. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. So I started pursuing that. I was not ROTC, I was not ROTC. I was just a regular student, but I committed to the Navy that once I graduated, I would go to officer candidate school and go be a civil engineer corps guy.
Yeah, I mean, for people that don't understand the Civil Engineering Corps, how would you describe it just generally?
It is so if you think about Navy and Marine Corps, because the Navy and the Marine Corps, it's two different services, but they're all under the Department of Navy. So their facilities, Marine Corps and Navy, it's all kind of one family. All of those bases all over the world, they're like little cities. They all have some purchase power, but many have their own power generation, their own wastewater treatment, their own housing, recreation facilities, office space, production stuff, docks, airfields, all this stuff. It's like a city. And so who takes care of all that? Well, the grunt work is done mostly by civilians or contractors, but the supervision and management leadership and strategic planning for all that is done by this relatively small group of officers, men and women, called Civil Engineer Corps. So at a given Navy base, like I'm in Pensacola, Florida, and this is where all the naval aviators train. So there's a big naval air station in Pensacola. There's probably 6 or 7 or 8 Civil Engineer Corps officers at that base in charge of construction projects, maintaining utilities and facilities, doing work orders, all that stuff. And they probably have a civilian workforce of several hundred doing all that work.
Yeah, obviously you're coordinating things, lots of things happen. What is one of the most memorable stories you had, working in that, or let's say lesson, either or?
Okay, so a story, and the best part about it, Tots, is it's a true story. It's not embellished. Those are the best. You don't have to make up anything. So my very first tour, tour of duty, they call it job, after I was commissioned and went to a special school to learn how to be a civil engineer corps officer, was at a shipyard in Maine, a very old shipyard. Literally, if you've ever heard of the USS Constitution or visited that, it's a historic wooden ship in Boston. I think it's part of the Freedom Trail. It's really cool, like one of those old three-masted wooden ships. Wooden ship. Well, the shipyard I was at in Maine, this was in Maine. built that ship. Like that's how old it is. Like the shipyard was commissioned in 1800. So what does that mean in terms of what I did? Well, I was the assistant public works officer. I had counterparts down the road who were in charge of construction. I was more in charge of maintaining operating facilities. Well, this shipyard was so old that, and it was an island. At some point in the early 20th century, and it was already 100 years old, they started running out of space. So they just made more land. They made the island bigger. They just, dumped dirt and said, well, it turns out, long story way shorter, included in what they dumped, because there was no EPA, there was no rules about environmental stuff, they dumped a whole bunch of other not good stuff, like barrels of chemicals, an old Japanese submarine from World War II or one or so. Anyway, it was crazy. It was a super fun site on this base because they didn't know better in the early 20th century. They're like, hey, we need more land. Let's just put some stuff in the ground, make more land. And so, way before I got there, they had this huge cleanup effort to remediate all that. I just thought that is crazy that they it just shows how like we still have a long way to go with environmental stuff, but it wasn't that long ago that the whole world was really clueless. Like, hey, it's probably not a good idea to put barrels of chemicals in the ground. Just insane.
Wow. I mean, lessons related to that, or lessons in general. Working for the Navy.
Well, a lot of what I learned, Tots, from my Navy time, there were some technical things that were, really useful stuff you don't learn in school. But most of what I learned was soft skills and leadership, dealing with people, especially in that deployable time, the CBs or all the folks that worked for me were enlisted folks, and learning. Uh, I kind of knew this intuitively anyway, but understanding that they may have to salute me because I'm the officer, but they've forgotten more about construction than I know. So having a kind of a humble approach to that, and being willing to learn from these very experienced senior people, even if they're quote unquote only enlisted, and not having some kind of a holier than thou mindset, that kind of people soft communication skills that was invaluable, and frankly I got a lot more out of that than any sort of technical, because a lot of stuff that we were building was pretty simple. When I went on to work at the University of Florida, I got into some really complex construction, but the people skills and leadership, I think that's what I really took from the Navy.
Sure, absolutely. So, give me an example, something very complex that you're part of via the University of Florida.
Yeah, complex, but in a fun way, because it was like hey, let's learn about this thing that I've never heard of. So, roughly 2005, 2006, I was given a new assignment. I'd been at the University of Florida since 1999, so a few years, had my feet wet, understood what I was doing a little bit. But I was told that the university wanted to build a nanoscale research facility. I said, "Well, that sounds cool.
Wow, what's a nanoscale?
What's that?" Well, okay. So it turns out, and now it's a little more out there. A little more people have heard of nanoscience, or they probably understand. Nano just means really, really small, like you think microscope. Okay,
Sure.
micro scale. Well, nano is like several levels of small below micro. So it's really, really small stuff that you need really powerful electron microscopes to see. Well, it turns out University of Florida is a big land grant institution with the College of Medicine and Engineering and all this great stuff going on. Turns out that a lot of colleges and departments were doing their own stuff with nanoscience, like looking on a real small molecular or smaller scale, but none of them were talking to each other. Engineers were doing their thing, the docs were doing their thing, some physicists were doing. So the idea of building this new building is to bring all of those very smart, really interesting folks together, and what kind of science could they come up with if the engineers are coordinating with the doctors? Like, well, okay, that sounds really cool. Well, the facility to support that was, I'd never dealt with anything like that. To give you an example, Tots, I had never built a facility with a clean room in it. I'm talking like where people wear those white suits and little booties. And
Sure.
um, I mean, in terms of construction, this is the easiest way to that even a layperson could understand this. In a typical office building, plus or minus, the air changes with just a standard air conditioning system about 6 to 8 times per hour. The air in a room is turned over 6 or 8 times in an hour. That's about normal. In this clean room we were building, it was in the range of 5 or 600 air changes per hour. So you can imagine the scale, the filtration, the load, the cost of just the mechanical systems and filtration and all this other stuff to create a clean environment because of what they were doing in the bays within this facility. So that kind of stuff. Other parts were, it wasn't even the clean room. These powerful microscopes I talked about are super sensitive. They're sensitive to electro and magnetic um, pulses and stuff, to the point where we had to do a study when we picked our site, or we thought we had picked our site. We literally did a study to see what was going on all around the site. It turns out that big buses rolling by was a problem because it's a big piece of metal that's moving, creates a magnetic field that could interfere with these microscopes. I'm like, are you serious? And it's 200 feet away from the building. So we
How
had to,
did you find that out? Did you bring in experts? I mean, obviously, you're in an
oh yeah,
area you're not familiar
oh
with.
yeah, yeah. We had to. There's firms, and again, actually through COA, through the organization I now run, I was able to reach out to some other higher ed owners who were like, "Oh yeah, you need to get in touch with this firm for electromagnetics. You need to touch with these guys when it comes to vibration analysis." It's another thing we had to do. So it was just a really tricked out design and construction process to equip the building to be able to support the science and the equipment that went with that science. It was pretty unique.
Yeah, for sure. Huh. Okay. So, how, was it easy to get everyone together to work together? Like you got the construction side. Did you have any hand in bringing people together to collaborate on this shared facility?
When you say bring do you mean the people
You
who, the
said people
scientists who are
are,
going to,
yeah, the scientists that are going to use it. You said that everyone's doing their own thing. Were you
right?
part of sort of bringing people together? Because obviously, a shared facility means everyone has different needs. So, how did you manage that?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the art of being. That's part of the art of being the owner's project manager. That's why my organization exists, is to try to convey. How do you do that? Even if it wasn't a nanoscale facility, most projects you're building it for someone, and usually there's different competing sometimes interests. Like, if it's an office building, well, the clerical folks need this and the managerial folks need this. And these days you got to think, well, what about virtual work? Do we need as much space? So yeah, absolutely, a big part of what I was doing is bringing. Now, I didn't bring them together for the first time. They had already come together to realize the vision. Hey, we need to have a facility. Then they brought my office in. But once, so all the players have been established, Tats. When I got introduced to them, it was purely from a, okay, folks, I understand you've done this and this, and this is what you think, but let me walk you through how the process is going to work, including picking our architect engineer team and our construction team. And then y'all can start talking to me about your needs as they relate to facilities. And that's kind of what led to, so it was kind of a collaborative thing from the onset. Like, the players had already been established. And it was really cool because, I mean, there's some exceptionally smart people. But what I found is most of them were, kind of stayed in their lane. They were humble enough to know, look, I know this nanoscience, but I don't know how you pick architects or what kind of concrete we need. That's why we have you. I'm like, yeah, so we'll make a good team. So it was super fun, but very similar process to every other project.
Sure, absolutely. Now, you mentioned COA, which is the Construction Owners Association of America. I'm assuming at your time at the University of Florida, it sounded like you were a member.
Exactly. Yeah, I got introduced to COA. Maybe I was only at UF maybe 2 or 3 years, and I was asked to be a presenter on project delivery methods. Like design, bid, build versus CM at risk versus what, at a COA conference. And of course, I'm like, sure. What's COA? And then so one of my colleagues at UF had been part of it for a long time, and he explained it, and I said, yeah, that sounds cool. Oh, and it's in New Orleans. Yeah, great. Okay, I have family there. Um, so I went and presented. And what I found, Tots, this is circa 2000, 2001, so quite a ways back. Um, what I found was a lot of people, and I say this lovingly, and I am one, just kind of dorky about project, like people who are just really serious about doing projects better, which is kind of what I was like. And I was like, hey, I think I found my people. These guys are all dorks, or gals too. Um, Dorks in a good way, trying to continuously improve. Um, And that was evident by, like, I did my little presentation and I had like 15 people come up afterwards. And that's usually a good sign. They're not just there to kind of, because I told them to come here. They were serious about doing this thing. So that kind of lit a fuse. And then, long story way shorter, I started getting involved with the Florida chapter of COA, and then eventually got involved as a volunteer at the national level. So yeah, that's what kind of sparked me, is just being a presenter at one of their conferences.
Yeah, and with COA, for people that know, is it all about sort of best practices on delivery methods, or is it more holistic in the mandate?
It's more holistic. It's kind of I'm kind of a visual person, and so if you think about, talk to people about, think about any project, but from the owner's perspective, the client. If you're a builder or designer, I think of it as a pie, like an apple pie, and there's different pieces. One piece, a very important piece, of course, is the program, the scope. What is it we're doing and why? Another piece is budget and cost control. Another piece is schedule. Another piece is code compliance. Another piece may be sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. All these different pieces. And so our approach at COA is to kind of look at the whole pie. We aren't going to focus just on project delivery methods or just on the adoption of lean, for example, which is a fantastic thing. We're gonna sort of talk about and look at just about everything, which means that we have members, owner members, because we have members that are non-owners, too, builders and architects and engineers. But we have owners that build very different things. We have, healthcare and higher ed, and Chick-fil-A is a member, Amazon's a member. These are very, very different, public, private, large, small. And so we're not really talking about best practices for an Amazon data center or a Chick-fil-A restaurant. We're talking about the holistic, the piece, the common thread things that are kind of an issue on every project, from leadership and soft skills to contracts to project delivery methods, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's very neat. Now, so you talked about the pie holistically. I mean, um, what are some examples of people that really do it right? Because obviously within your organization, there's different things. When you think of HECOA and what it stands for, and you think of firms or individuals that do it right, what comes to mind?
Yeah, so even I can name names, organizations, Tots, but maybe an even better way to do it is just to say that on the owner side in particular, because that's who we're all about, owners, construction owners, it's folks who have a mindset. And we actually ended up 2 or 3 years ago. This had been sort of out there in the ethos for a while. We finally kind of put a name to it, and we call it the COAA Way. We even created a little logo for it, and people first hear that they like. COAA. Oh, so it's like a cookbook. Like I follow these steps and everything's going to go great. Like no, 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 it's not that. Every project's different. We don't pretend to know all the answers. That's not it. It's more of a mindset. It's more of a culture, which does exist on projects, like it or not. Team people come together sometimes from all over the world, and there's an environment, a culture, a vibe, and it kind of relates to that, and it relates to the idea that the owner kind of sets the tone, and has a big role in that culture. And that culture, we hope and think and believe it should be transparent. It's sometimes hard for owners to be transparent, like for various reasons, political, or ooh, this is secret, or we don't want to tell you because then everybody else will know, or whatever their reasons are. But frankly, that's the best way to get projects done. Just put it all on the table. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is our budget. Sometimes you can't do that, but that sort of thing, that's kind of the common thread amongst our members, is this co-away belief. The idea that people, tots, deliver projects. Our industry is rightfully really into things to make our industry better, like lean, or like building information modeling, or there's lots and lots of examples. And all those things are cool, but we like to say, and it's true, that hey, all that stuff is great, but it's still people. Everyone from a laborer pushing the broom all the way up to the design principal and the owner and the donor, if there was a donor, like it's all people. And so relationships, communication, soft skills, all these things matter. That's what ultimately. Now, of course, you want to be on time, and yeah, use building information modeling, and sure, let's do prefabrication and let's be lean and all that stuff, but it's still people. that's kind of the common thread amongst our folks is understanding that people are what drive good and bad projects, and that culture does matter.
Yeah. I mean, so that's the mindset. So what do you think your average company to do more tactically to facilitate that? I mean, whether it's, we're a little bit more distributed now with the average company. I mean, how does that come in with your thinking?
And I don't know if the answer is going to be different, Tots, but when you say company, do you mean like an owner organization or more like a
Sure.
company
I mean, I
working
think
together?
you talked about mindset, but I guess what are some practical, like, let's say you want to improve this area. How would you maybe specifically assess how you are doing, and what are some practical tips that
Yeah.
someone could implement?
So okay, I'll give you an example, pretty tangible one that we did when I was at UF quite a while ago. This is mid 2000s maybe. We were looking to improve our whole game, our contracts, our processes. We kind of felt like we could do better. We wanted to be an owner that people wanted to work for, builders, designers, and so we did a retreat off campus. We have this UF owns this property with a lake and canoes. It's for students, but we could use it as staff. And it's like in the woods and it's barbecue grills and it's real nice. So we went there and we invited all of the construction management firms, national, regional, small, local, that were working for us or had worked for us to come. Send two reps, no more than two. And we had a whole, might have been a half day. I think it was a whole day. We had hot dogs and burgers and bottled water. We didn't have any alcohol, but it was meant to be an open discussion about us improving. And it wasn't. We were real careful to kind of say, look, this is not meant to be a, pardon my French, but like a bitch session. We don't want this to turn into somebody standing up and telling us 30 minutes, you guys stink because my pay app was late. Yeah, okay. We're trying to, and so we did things, for example, like we shared some language we were thinking about adding or changing in our contracts because we wanted their feedback. That it may sound like okay, burgers and hot dogs and go to the lake and whatever. No, but they loved it because there was like, wow, we've never had an owner ask us our opinion or what we think. I mean, you're paying us, so we just do what you say, right? Well, but we want to do it better. And so that's just one example, Tots, where I think owners sometimes, if they just let their guard down a little bit and maybe invite their, and maybe make it selective, make it the partners that you work that you believe are your best ones. If you just want to limit it to the cream of the crop, we made it kind of open to everyone. And I think we got a lot of traction with that because people, they just appreciated being asked. We couldn't implement every suggestion they said. That wouldn't be practical. Some of them were kind of crazy, but we listened and we tried to adopt what we could, and they appreciated that.
Yeah. So that's great because as owners, like you just mentioned that sometimes you pay them, and if they're good, and but they're opening up for two sides sort of dialogue, right? Two-way dialogue. So that's very
Yeah.
exciting. Now, just going back to the other side, which is you mentioned, some of the cream of the crop service providers or contractors or whatnot. What have you heard? Maybe it's from your experience or from other experiences to get in as one of the top, right? Like what characteristics? What do you like? What are some of the things you hear in your membership?
Yeah, when it comes to those service providers that are viewed by any owner as kind of the superstars, the best ones, um, I, I think it's both tangible and intangible, Tots. The tangible side, kind of obvious. It's almost like duh, right? But folks who uh, do what they say they'll do, and I don't necessarily mean like adhere to contractual stuff, but even if it's just informal, like yeah, we'll have that to you by next Friday, and they hit it. Hey, I'd rather you tell me it's going to be 2 weeks from Friday, and I hate it, I need it sooner, but at least you're being accurate, like that kind of thing. Transparency, great communication, that's a common thread, and it sounds like it's almost cliche, like, "Yeah, okay, great communication." No, but sometimes it's hard to communicate well. It's hard to tell bad news. It's hard to tell an owner, "Sorry, this shipment is delayed." It's just, but that's better than me finding out from my boss, right? I mean, so again, collaboration, that's another thing. Collaboration, I have a friend that in COA that says collaboration is messy. And he's right. Sometimes it's hard to collaborate. You're talking about the nanoscientists and bringing them together. These very smart people, and they don't all agree on stuff, and that's difficult. But man, if you can make it work, it's so much. So all of those sorts of things, I think, are kind of part of that stew. Is just folks who are timely, who do what they say they're going to do, and communicative and transparent, and obviously hardworking and hit the milestones. But I think the intangibles tats are maybe play as big a role or a bigger role actually than the tangible. All things being equal, like let's just can say two contractors. Yeah, they were both about on time, both about on budget. But this guy, I always kind of wondered if they were telling me the whole story. And this other guy, I was 100% sure I was getting the full thing. So all things being equal, I'd rather work with that guy. I mean, that kind of thing.
Yeah, very good examples. Thank you for that. Um, where do you see the organization going? I mean, you have goals and visions with where you are today and where you want to go with COA. What are your thoughts there?
Well, we'd like to diversify our membership. Again, it might sound cliche. When I say diversify, I mean that in several ways. Our industry needs to get younger. I think we all know that. So does our organization. I think our median age is mid 40s. Um, we need to get the younger folks. I know they're out there. They're part of some of our member organizations, but it's like they're too busy. They're down in the basement cranking work out. Man, they don't have time. We need to get them involved. We need to get younger. That's one form of diversification. Obviously, there's way too many middle to old age white guys. We need that kind of diversification. Diversity of thought. And then for us in particular, we're very heavy in public owners, TOTS, like higher ed, and even we have some private higher ed too, but a lot of higher ed is University of Florida. It's a public institution. A lot of governmental agencies, everyone from GSA, feds, all the way down to cities and states and counties. A lot of healthcare, which is sometimes kind of quasi public private, but a lot of K-12 school districts, a lot of public. We'd love to grow. So back to the question, we believe that COA is a good fit for just about any owner doing just about anything, especially in the vertical side. Not as sure on the horizontal side. That's a whole nother discussion, like departments of transportation and that. Not sure because I don't know that world as well, which is ironic because I'm a civil engineer, right? You would think I would, but I really don't. Um, but yeah, like I mentioned, Amazon and Chick Fil A. We would love to get Google and Facebook and the other techs and a lot there's some retail and all of these airports. We feel like all of those kind of owners have a home at COA because again, we're not talking about best practices for airport runways. We're talking about best practices for leading projects of any kind. So we kind of feel like the generalist approach fits just about any owner. That's our goal is to diversify.
Yeah, very cool. Is there something I did not cover that you wanted to mention or plug?
I mean, just that, Toss, this is going big picture philosophical, but it's been more than tough last 2+ years in the world, no matter who you are, no matter what you do, right? And everyone knows why. COVID, race relations, political elections, Supreme Court decisions. There's just a lot that shootings. There's a lot of bad news out there, a lot of stress. Our profession, our industry, I should say, construction, I think it has the second highest suicide rate of any. There's a lot of mental health issues out there. And I guess my thing is, and that's why I said sorry if I'm going too big picture, but like let's just keep talking. That this do what you and I are doing is awesome because let's just get out there and talk about it, right? Even if it's like our industry tots, famously, and this is pretty much a negative thing, kind of just very testosterone infused forever. Get it done. Doesn't matter what the cost. And that's still, yeah, you got to have goals. You got to have deadlines. You can't just say, sure, take your time, build it and finish it whenever you want. I'm not, that's stupid. But like people do matter. They're not resources, they're people. And things like mental health, morale, people dealing with this weird hybrid where I'm virtual, I'm in person, and just keep talking, man. Just keep talking. That's what I think we provide to our members is an outlet to just keep talking. You may come to a COA conference to give an example. And there may not be 75 tangible process improvement things you take home. Maybe there's three or four, but there could just be, the idea that someone else is going through the same thing we are back home. Okay, I feel a little bit better. Like we suck, but kind of everyone else does too. You know what I mean? Like there's strength in numbers, and it's good to just keep talking. I worry, Tots, that people, because of COVID, are in this shelter in place mode and they're just kind of solving their stuff by themselves. You can't do it that way. Connect and network and talk, and what you and I are doing and what we try to do. I think that's a big part of everyone. Just exhale, man. We'll get through it. Let's just keep talking. That's my point.